And that's like dopamine. We talk about dopamine.
We're talking about
receptors
dopamine, basically, the feel-good neurotransmitter.
So do people experience this as like a blacking out almost, that the subconscious sort of takes over the drive? And
well, they don't know where it comes from.
Right.
But yeah, it is like a blackout. It's automatic. They can't stop it.
Right.
They can't contain themselves. And that's why you have to, really get somebody sober and keep them sober a long time to get their brain back to normal functioning. But tell us more.
It's free psychotherapy.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. And that's when I got out of the crawl space. No. There was a lot of craziness that went on. I went in, I got, I got sober, or made an attempt to get sober, and did it one day at a time, and did some things that were suggested to me without breaking the anonymity of how I did it. And it was pink cloud at first, I guess you could say. There was that, this is great. I haven't experienced a clarity like this in a long time, probably since early childhood. And then kind of the realization of real and imagined memories coming back. And that was a very tough hill to get over, which anybody who's done it before,
And how long were you sober when that started?
Probably around a year and a half.
Do you want a couch?
No. Just a little heroin.
It's a little heroin. MDMA is the new treatment, right?
Oh, that stuff is ridiculous.
But that's an important question because, you were medicating. You were self-medicating.
Absolutely.
Well, aren't most people self-medicating?
I think so, yeah.
Constantly?
In one way or another.
Well, because the medicine stops working, you got to keep on taking the medicine.
Yeah, but aren't we all always sort of self-medicating? Isn't it an issue of degree and moderation and trying to find a balance in life?
It's adaptive, I mean, you're talking about an adaptive way of coping with life.
Right.
And so we have to find something to feel good about.
One of the things that we've been talking about in this show is the concept of spirituality, religious development, and moral development, and how they're all different, and how those can affect decisions that people make. When there's been a lot of stigma with addiction, when you think of those concepts as general sort of buckets of ideas, how do you think morality and religion and spirituality play into addiction versus just psychodynamic therapy or whatever you would call it as a psychiatrist?
Well, I'll be very clinical here.
Okay.
And probably most of the night I will be as well. I think that there are ways of regulating self-esteem. And self-esteem is kind of the feel-good. Again, when our self-esteem is good, we're feeling good about ourselves, dopamine's flowing.
Right.
And there are a lot of ways to do that.
Like?
Well?
And Judah wants to know.
Yeah, I need to know this. I'm getting therapy, too. I'm going to get a couch.
You know what? We're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to find out what kind of dopamine activities
how
Judah
can make dopamine.
Yeah, how it can make dopamine. So our phone number is
877-8830-830. That's 877-8830-830.
We'd love to welcome your calls for Dr. Ko or for Mick or for Judah or myself. It's KLEAN Radio, and we'll speak to you in a few minutes. I think Judah's forgetting that we're actually being videotaped because
I love that song.
He's doing like air band or something.
It's air drum.
Air drum.
To My Chemical Romance.
Activating his dopamine receptors.
Okay, so before because we're going to have to go to break shortly, right? What is a dopamine? And please don't say you.
Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, okay, and it's an excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain, and it's hooked to a lot of circuits that make us feel good.
I like that. That definition I like. I get it. Because there's certain words you constantly hear these days that you have no idea. They're just thrown about. Borderline personality disorder.
Oh.
That's a very longshoreman-esque kind of description of it, though, but you speak in a very nice doctoral tone. But if you're like, it's a thing and it makes you feel good. Yeah, right? Like, same answer. It's all the accent. It's a very non-specific thing. It's a thing in your brain. And it makes you feel real good.
That's all you need to do.
And so what happens basically is when you drink, it hits it?
Yeah, somehow it does, yeah. I mean, we don't really know. There's no way to measure these things in our brain. We're just talking in kind of crude road map type senses. Then you hear a lot about serotonin,
Right.
also a feel-good chemical, but it more acts towards anxiety. It's a calming type of neurotransmitter. And then norepinephrine is activating or stimulating as well, and that's kind of like the dopamine.
Sounds like a fat Irish girl I dated in high school.
And so basically what they call the beta blockers. Now beta blockers.
Serotonin does do it.
Beta blocker is another one. So is it beta blocker? What is a beta blocker?
A beta blocker is it's a peripheral blocker of stimulating neurotransmitters. So it actually lowers blood pressure, it lowers pulse. So some of the peripheral or physical manifestations of anxiety, shaking, high blood pressure, it'll calm that. And some people use it for anxiety successfully.
Right. So that's your secondary nervous system, right? Like,
well, peripheral nervous system.
Peripheral nervous system.
Before that, we were talking about the central nervous system,
right.
and that's the brain,
right?
Okay, which is really a kind of a neurochemical soup, and it's the last great frontier in neuroscience. Well, in medical science, we know about,
It's scary when your doctor tells you your brain is made of a soup.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or when you're like, Doc, what's going on? He's like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I like about that. But that's what I like about Dr. Ko is he's like honest. He's like, I don't really know.
Nobody really knows.
Yeah, it's like but how many doctors would actually say that? They'd come up with some like, well, the dopamine transmitters are linked to the,
Right.
and he's like saying it's new frontier.
Which is why you obviously through deductive reasoning have to study the behavior around the person's actions, because you can't actually get in there and understand the chemicals, right? So it's the closest you can get to.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on it. There's circuits in there too, and there are lots of different parts of the brain, and we kind of, roughly know some areas of the brain and what they do. We know the temporal lobe and the hippocampus is involved with memory. We know that the frontal lobe is judgment and reasoning, planning. It's called the executive part of the brain, makes decisions. So we know that kind of stuff just from rather crude experiments and faults of nature, as well as faults of from neurosurgery, people who've had gunshot wounds. So we've studied it in a crude sense, and we're learning.
So in your honest opinion, is there a drug out there, any sort, that could cure addiction?
We're a long way from that.
And what's this? Because people keep on going to Mexico now and Toronto and Canada to get this. It's
ibogaine.
Ibogaine.
It's not really a cure. It's a hallucinogen that people are taking, and they claim that they have an experience when they take it that it creates a sense of a lack of craving for the taking of narcotics. So they detox quickly on ibogaine through this hallucinogenic experience, and then claim they have no cravings to take mostly heroin.
I just don't think people are that simple.
That's why it's happening in Mexico
and Canada. Because it's an expensive procedure. I believe I know somebody that went, and it's like
there's a lot of people in Mexico that if you go on Google, you can search, and there's a lot of clinics across the border that are like, come get ibogaine, and people are going down to Mexico and taking it and having this experience, but then they're coming back and they're finding that, doesn't necessarily work for all that long. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done. The FDA in the U.S., of course, want to approve it. We're going to need to take another break right now. We'll be back in a few minutes on KLEAN Radio. Please give us a call.
That's 877-830-830. That's 877-830-830.
We'll be happy to answer your questions.
I love that. Welcome back. I love that Rand, who puts all the bumper music together, put "Cause I Got High" by Afro Man as the bumper music for KLEAN Residential Treatment Center.
I just want to tell you, Judah, we're going to take video clips of your dancing in and out on the intros and outros, and we're going to put you on YouTube, and you're going to turn into like that guy that had the sword from Star Wars, that fairly obese child that everybody made into 1,000 other videos.
That's an old reference for me.
Oh, okay. You're not in the modern YouTube.
No, I was more of a Star Trek fan.
Okay.
Okay, so I wanted to ask the doctor this question, okay, and
Of course, you're Jewish and you want free medical advice.
And I
What's new?
actually, we are giving seminars on Andrew's anti-Semitism also afterwards.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Starting with my wife.
Yeah. What I love that my mother goes to me. My mother watches the show and she goes to me. She goes, "Is Andrew's wife Jewish?" And I was like, "Yes, but Andrew's not." And she just assumed you were.
Everybody assumes
Everyone
I'm Jewish.
Yeah, everybody.
everybody.
You know, you take. You know, take it.
You're outing me as not being Jewish.
Sorry.
You better convert, Andrew.
I know. Well, there's a lot involved with that.
That is. It's a hard conversion process.
No kidding. There's a surgery involved.
I mean, the real one. It's with the Orthodox, it's about a 2.5-year process.
I have a DVD set, 1 hour, called "Welcome to the Torah." So if you want to,
Really?
yeah, it's only an hour.
And I have I have the Idiot's Guide if you want it.
I'm probably one of the few people who have actually read the Bible, I think.
Well, not in here because I've read it.
Just
Yeah.
just the first 5 books.
I've read the first 5 books. Yes.
Yeah. The prequel.
The prequel.
It doesn't end well.
The original. The original. But I was watching, I'm addicted to this channel called IDTV, Investigation Discovery. Have you ever seen this? It basically took all the forensic shows and it put it on a 24-hour
Love
loop
it.
on one network.
Wow.
And I'm sitting, and it was just like my dream. And I'm sitting there watching, like, today, one of the shows is called Sins and Secrets, and they all have these great names like Deadly Women. And they're talking about this, I think it was Deadly Women, and this woman, and the
How
word...
many of them did you date?
None yet, thank God. But one of the it was funny because my roommate was sitting behind me, and they mentioned borderline personality disorder.
Right.
And my roommate goes, "Why do they call it borderline? Like either you have a personality disorder or you don't." And I thought it was actually a very good question because if you say borderline, it sounds like you almost have it.
Yeah, that's not.
And that's not the case,
Right.
right?
That's not the case. Borderline personality disorder is a serious personality disorder, and it's a controversial one as well. But technically speaking, there's certain criteria from the DSM that you diagnose it with.
What's the DSM for those who don't know?
Diagnostic and Statistical Manual.
And what's that?
It's the official publication by the American Psychiatric Association for diagnosing mental disorders.
Right.
And DSM is in its 4th edition now. They're working on the 5th, and they're going to probably revamp personality disorders again.
As well as addiction.
And addiction, I think. Yeah.
They're going to change the definition of addiction.
Two.
So a lot of talk about what's addictive versus what's abusive behavior or misuse.
Abuse versus addiction.
Abuse versus addiction.
Do you think that's because so many young people are getting labeled, or?
I think there's a lot of reasons for it. A lot of it's political, and a lot of it, I think, is also trying to broaden the definition of the criteria, correct?
Well, also there's process addictions or behavioral addictions, whether they're going to put those in. That's an interesting question. Addiction is, it's a physiologic problem as well as a behavioral problem. And the DSM basically defines a problem as when it interferes with your life, when it somehow adversely affects your functioning.
So, coffee for me these days.
Or family.
Guys, we actually...
Family,
right?
Functioning includes family, work, how much time you devote to it. But, if your relationships start to break down or your work life breaks down, then you have a DSM.
So it truly becomes the effect. Like Bill Clinton, just using that as a quick example, he would be classified now as an addict because
A sex addict, right?
A sex addict because it affected, obviously a lot.